I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's a lovely day in Watford, just outside London. I hope it's lovely where everyone is around the world. I can see we've got quite a few different people from all over the world, so it's a really good mix as always. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. So today is session 3 of our third webinar series, and today we're going to talk about change management and how we deal with all the different changes, revisions, rescheduling, all those type of things that kind of affect a construction project. So as I said, this is the third in our webinar series. Just today we uploaded the last webinar series, which is top down versus bottom up. We had a bit of a technical issue there, but it's just gone online today. So if you haven't seen it or you're interested in that kind of planning or the differences between those types of planning, please get in touch. You can view that on our YouTube channel or on our website, which is VisiLean.com/webinar. And you can also register for future events because there is limited space. So like I said, today we're going to talk about change management and dealing with constant revisions. The next webinar, which I think is in 3 weeks, will be BIM Utopia, the biggest gap between technology potential and realized benefits. Then we've got M stands for management in BIM, then LBIM, lean building information management, and then finally ending this series on importance of integration management. We will do some questions at the end, so just if you have any, just keep them there and I'll invite some of the VisiLean team and myself will try and answer some of your questions, or if you're looking for a demo or anything like that. So we always start the session with kind of reviewing the status quo of the topic we're talking about. So here are some quite startling kind of numbers to throw at you here. So 35% of all construction projects will have a major change. And we see this wherever we go with VisiLean around the world to all of our different clients. Changes happen all the time on major projects. And if we think about the scale of these projects, these can cause huge, huge issues. We'll come on to that in a second. The next one, 30% of initial data created during design and construction phases is lost by project closeout. And it's, again, there's so much good data being collected and good sources of information and places where we can collect that information on a construction project. But by the end of the project, we never really use that. And it's important to kind of review what went well, but also what didn't go well, so we can take that onto the next project and improve performance. But you often see as well, especially from the design phase to construction phase, that data doesn't really transfer between the teams and it gets lost. Whereas if you can maximize and utilize it, you can become a bit more efficient. This is a big one. So 18% of the contract value is spent in dealing with change orders. So if we look at some of the scale of some of these projects, 18% could be millions and millions of pounds, dollars, euros, whatever currency you're dealing with. It's huge, huge money. So if we can kind of reduce the impact of these changes, we can start to become more efficient, especially in construction where margins are so tight. We need to really mitigate the impact of these changes. 78% of engineering and construction companies believe that project risks are increasing. And we've seen this more and more with kind of tenders and things, and the price of build costs are kind of creeping up, especially here in the UK. Last year, we obviously had COVID, and a lot of people were factoring that kind of risk. They weren't sure where materials were available, what labor was available, and things like that. So that's, again, causing massive changes and costs. Change orders account for anywhere from 8% to 14% of capital construction projects. Again, on some of these projects, the costs are so high that these might seem small percentages, but they equate to really big costs. And then lastly, 20% of large projects typically take 20% longer to finish than scheduled and are up to 80% over budget. Now, these, again, this was a statistic we showed in the last webinar. That is a huge, huge amount of delay plus overrun. Now, if we think of the margins some of these companies are running on, it's quite easy to see how one bad project can really make a company suffer or even go bust, we've seen in the UK. So it's really important to mitigate the impact of anything we can to become more efficient. And in today's topic, to try and reduce the amount of delays or issues caused by these changes, and to try and spin some of these changes into positives. This is just a graphic kind of showing what's kind of happening on the construction sites we visit and what our clients are giving us feedback on, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. So the gentleman on the left says, the drawings aren't matching the conditions here. We need to revise the structural design right now. Now that leads to work stopping. That leads to maybe teams having to stand down, a delay in packages, delay in activities being done, and leads to overrun and costs being incurred. Now, the lady on the right-hand side says there's no design clearance for this job on site. The drawings haven't been approved yet. And that's a typical example of what we see around the world and all the projects we visit, that there's no real collaboration between teams, okay? That needs to really improve. Construction team isn't talking to the design team. We haven't got the latest specs. We haven't got the latest drawings, designs, model, anything. And we really need to collaborate to reduce the amount of changes that occur on a construction project. So some of the common changes that are kind of more typical on construction projects that we see and work with. So there's changes in scope. Predominantly, this is kind of client requirements not clearly defined at the beginning of the project. But also, on the other hand, it might be a contractor not capturing the client's requirements correctly, not finding, kind of realizing what drives value for the client. So that way you can mitigate any sort of later on changes. If you can try and see really what drives the client's ambitions, you can mitigate any sort of changes, hopefully later on down the line. Obviously, those changes still will occur, potentially will occur if the client does change their mind, but the more you can kind of scope in at the beginning, the better. Design revisions, so missing details, design errors, or practical design changes due to site conditions or scope changes, these are continuous. And you see these from start to finish of a construction project. We've seen where work started and they don't even have a design in place. And it just causes massive issues. Those kind of constant changes are disrupting and not in a good way. And then there's revised execution strategies, which can lead to changes. So unforeseen site conditions, unavailability of resources, material delays, external constraints, and there's loads more. These can, again, cause changes. And it's about how we mitigate the changes that will really affect the project and hopefully reduce any sort of costs that might be incurred or any sort of issues that may arise. Sorry. So design changes during execution. We see this all the time. So a last minute structural design change can bring work on site to a standstill for weeks at a time. And we've seen this on more than one project. So what tends to happen is kind of changes creep across the project. They start small and then they spiral and they have a bit of a domino effect, which I'll come on to in a second. So first and foremost, is your design frozen? So have we said, okay, design finishes, we're happy with that, no more design changes? The likelihood is probably not. Even if you're midway through executing the project or an activity or something like that, there are constant revisions and sometimes it's just never ending. Now, what happens is that's at the design house. And when this moves to kind of the head office of a construction team or the client or whatever, they're creating their schedules. Now, because of the constant revisions in design, you could be creating a schedule based off an old design or an old revision. Now, that causes so many issues. There could be different scope of works, different resources needed, things like that. And it just leads to more change later on down the line. Now, when that kind of schedule reaches site, they're having to quickly do some firefighting because they've got to come up with a new program based on a new design, okay? Now, they're doing this in a very short space of time. They might not be looking at the impact of this. They might not be understanding the ramifications of the kind of short-term planning that they're trying to do just to be able to execute some activities. And again, that's going to cause huge delays and issues and things like that later on. By the time this information actually gets to site, there's a huge disconnect between planned the actuals. So the teams on site are left to come up with ad hoc solutions and constantly firefighting. And I mentioned this before in a webinar that when you're constantly firefighting and dealing with issue after issue, you don't have the capacity to learn something new, to improve performance, to review what's going well. You're literally just worrying about issue to issue. So you can see how something so small, a small kind of issue at the beginning, can cause a delay in the project. And I've got a better example actually of that coming up. And for those of you that are using 4D simulation, it's very rare that they reflect the actual site status. Now, if I take that example I just gave you, we've got possibly an old revision because someone's working on a new revision and we haven't collaborated with them to know that there's a new revision being worked on. So we've come up with a program based on an old revision that could be completely out of date. And by the time we link those two and we start to do the 4D simulations, we're working on something that's kind of wildly inaccurate. So it's important, and I will come on to this, that we collaborate throughout the project, all the different teams, all the different stakeholders, as early as possible to mitigate these kind of issues happening. So, for example, if the design team are working on a revision, let the construction team know that that's happening. Maybe give them some information they can work from. You might not be able to give them the exact details, but give them a good understanding of what they need to do so they can start working on programs. So we're not having to stop work completely. And those type of things are really important to improve efficiency. So what's the big issue with all these changes? What actually happens? So the smallest change on a project, and I've got an example coming up, can have a domino effect. And another analogy is kind of a snowball effect. So it picks up pace and it becomes a big issue, okay? So there's never a quick fix. Each change either involves extensive design coordination or kind of stopping work to take some time to think about it. Now, even if you can come up with a quick fix, the likelihood is it will probably cause an issue later on down the line. Although it might not affect you, it might cause someone else an issue. And again, we're still having those changes occur somewhere along the project, causing an issue. Plans never account for buffers as much as people say they do. So if you take the example of a client, they are looking for a contractor, they're going to go with probably one of the cheapest and one of the quickest that can get whatever they want built, because they might have cash flow needs, they might have interest payments, things like that. So contractors want to be seen kind of favorably. So they want to get their work to be done as quick as possible, look to be done as quick as possible. Now, that can cause huge issues in itself. There are constant changes happening, okay? You've promised the world, but actually for that to happen, you need to make loads of different changes. You need to do rescheduling. You need to get the input for stakeholders. And what you've planned originally, or what you've kind of said you're going to do, is wildly inaccurate again. And then lastly, we need to accept the fact that changes are bound to happen, and we don't know what they are potentially on day one, but we can try our best to understand what could cause us an issue, what could cause a change, and try and see if we can eradicate that before it becomes a big issue. So this is that example I was saying earlier. So let's just take a facade design. So they've made a revision to the facade design while the execution team waits on site with the structural steel. Now, that revision reaches site. They've realized they need to change in the slab thickness because of the structural design and how it fits. They're going to need to change the thickness of the slab. That leads to a revised execution strategy. So again, we've had to stop work. We've probably had to think about something. We've had to engage different people, stop people doing works. And that just continuously disrupts the flow. Everything we had planned out is now changed. It's causing problems. And we're just in a kind of a spiral or circle of change and delays. So we're not having the time to understand or be kind of forward thinking in our planning or execution, because we're constantly dealing with these changes and revisions. And I'm just going to do a quick poll. So I can see a lot of you on the call and from loads of different companies and walks of life and things like that. So I want to ask, what's the maximum, let me just load it. What's the maximum number of design revisions you have witnessed during the delivery of a construction project? So 10 to 20, 20 to 50, more than 60. So we've got a wide variety of answers, some 10 to 20s. The majority of people are saying more than 60. Now, if we just kind of break that down, more than 60 changes, and I've seen much, much more as well. Can you imagine the amount of reorganization, the amount of resource we have to maneuver, the amount of rescheduling we have to do? If we can reduce that amount of changes by maybe collaborating earlier on in the project, or inviting stakeholders to participate earlier on, or at least mitigate the impact of those changes, we can start to reduce the impact. And when I say impact, I mean whether they lead to delays or extra costs or things like that, we can start to become much more efficient that way. And I can't stress enough how the margins in construction are so tight. So any small percentage we can become more efficient or reduce impacts of things or reduce delays, it's going to be massive cost saved. So the majority of people actually said between 20 and 50, but a high majority said, a high amount said 60. So just close that. Hopefully that comes back on. Hopefully everyone can see that again. So why are there so many revisions? And there's a few reasons. I'm just going to go through some of the fundamental ones. First and foremost, and I just mentioned it, there's no clarity of work. There's issues in communication and collaboration, and there's generally a lack of clarity on what exactly is value. So we haven't, at the beginning of a project, got all the stakeholders involved, found out what drives value from them, found out what each kind of stakeholder or each package or subcontractor needs to get their works done. And when we go to do our work, there's changes because, okay, I can't do that, or this isn't ready, things like that. And these changes, like I said, they start to spiral, and it becomes just a never-ending firefight to try and get to an end of a project when it shouldn't be like that. The more we can pass information, the more we can collaborate, the more efficient we're going to be. And I know some of you on the call, some of our clients here are really, really good at now getting all the stakeholders involved at a very early stage. And especially the client, like I mentioned earlier, find out really what drives value for them, because they're the one that's probably going to be changing their mind or changing variations and things the most. So the more you can capture an early stage, the less hopefully disruption you're going to have. And then another reason for so many revisions is not acting at the right time. So delayed actions, consecutive issues piling up, and they turn into critical problems. So we see this because there's this lack of communication, there's this lack of clarity. By the time we're actually actioning things, we've already got kind of a backlog of issues and delays and things like that. And it's not allowing us to act at the right time. And then again, we're just constantly dealing with an issue, but that new issues are arising. And then lastly, but not least, as some of the people on this call will probably agree with, poor design coordination. So there's rarely a consideration of constructability in design, and designers are kind of working in silos. So what we mean by that is designers are doing their absolute best efforts to design something, but have they really collaborated with the people going to do the work, or the people that are designed to execute that? And is it actually feasible? Often we've seen designs reach site and it's just not buildable. You can't kind of construct it in that way. But if we worked together at an earlier stage, we can mitigate those issues and say, actually, that's not really going to work. Can we come up with a solution that will help us both execute this? And again, working in silos, not sharing information, we say every single webinar causes issues. We want to be transparent. We want to collaborate. We want to give people the information they need to succeed, rather than keeping it all to ourselves and not sharing it. And we get contractors all the time ask us, is there a benefit of having, and this is a VisiLean kind of specific point here, is there a benefit of having the design phase on VisiLean? And the answer is always, always yes. The more you can collaborate at an earlier stage, and the more everyone's working off the same software, the benefits are huge. And we'll come onto those probably a bit later. But so often the designers are working in their own softwares and their own teams, probably not even, they might be external, and the sharing of that information is never as good as it could be. And you often see, especially with the kind of BIM element, they create some of the best models and things like that, but how often are those models ever used on site, or how often do those people get to visualize that? And again, I'll probably mention that a bit later. So it's not all doom and gloom. Some changes are essential and some changes are good. So not all changes are bad, and not all changes will have a negative impact. When observed at the right time and with the right approach, changes can be managed without a negative impact. So it's really important that you've got the right team in place and the right mindset to deal with a change when it comes. Be proactive, be able to make clear decisions because you've got clarity in your work, and they don't have to be a negative impact, even if it is something that might cause an issue. A famous quote by Glenn Ballard, who's kind of the founder of the Last Planner system, says, "All plans are forecasts and all forecasts are wrong. You're bound to have variance." We know there's going to be changes in a construction project. We don't know where they're going to come from necessarily, but we know they're going to happen. So it's important that we foster the mentality that we can deal with these changes and give people the data and the tools and the processes to be able to manage changes efficiently without them becoming massive delays. And then some changes are essential, so either for a better design, efficient execution, or simply essential for the realization of the project. Now, if we think of all the good tech, the new modern methods of construction that are coming in, softwares like VisiLean, some changes are good and even essential to help improve, to win those small margins in profits and things like that. And it's important to kind of, again, foster that mentality that, okay, this isn't something bad. We don't have to change everything we're doing, but okay, this change could help us. So you need to have the right kind of team in place and everything like that to be able to understand what changes you need to make, not just the ones that you're forced to make. So some changes are inevitable. We can't completely stop them. However, we can control the way we deal with them. And to deal with them efficiently, decision-making is critical. Time is of the essence. Efficient decision-making needs to be done. And to do that, you need to get your teams together, and not just your teams, but other teams, packages, different design and construction. Get as many people as you can to collaborate. I'm not saying have a 50-person call, but have the relevant teams speak. Okay, host pool planning sessions and process reviews. Understand what the impact of your activities are. Understand what their activities are, what they need to do their activities. Get feedback, and if there are changes, work through them together. Because if everyone is aligned, these changes will be hopefully dealt with efficiently. And it's vital to visualize milestones. So understand the targets, what you need the milestones you need to reach, and importantly, what can stop you reaching those milestones. So at the bottom it says be proactive and not reactive. So proactively map and resolve site-based constraints and even design-based constraints in planning discussions. So like I said, you've got your milestones as a target. So with all the other teams, with the people in the room, the people on the call, understand what's going to stop you or potentially stop you reaching those milestones, or what changes you think might happen. Okay, because if you're doing this hopefully in an efficient manner, you're doing this well before an activity is due to start. So if there is a constraint that occurs or an issue or a change, you have time to recuperate, analyze what you need to do, and execute it before it causes a delay. It's, again, I can't stress this enough, and I stress this on every webinar. It's important to collaborate and work as a team, and not just with your team, with all the other teams, with any other stakeholder in this kind of construction project, from design to close out, but deal with challenges and changes as a team. So integrate design and execution. So eliminate that silo-based approach to design we spoke about before. Designers don't work on their own anymore. They're part of a bigger picture. Have the collaboration between design and all the other teams, and hopefully that will lead to reduced rework. So, okay, designers working on something, let's get the package manager or let's get the contractor's input just to make sure that that works for everyone. And hopefully at that point, we're minimizing any sort of rework. What we don't want to happen is people to get to site and try and execute something, and then they need to rework, because by then it's far too late, and delays are going to happen. And like I said, early engagement of stakeholders. So not only do the designers need to work together, the teams need to communicate with both ends of the spectrum. So we need to integrate with the client. We need to integrate with, again, the contractor, the design team. Anyone who is part of delivering a construction project needs to integrate and collaborate as early as possible. And then once we've kind of fostered that mentality again, we need transparency between these teams. Long gone are the days of not sharing spreadsheets or not sharing data or things like that. We need to be transparent, and I need to know what the next person's doing. They need to know what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. If I've got a constraint that I've worked through, I need to share that with the next team, because they might come up with something similar and I've already worked through it, so this could benefit them. We're not doing that top-down approach solely anymore. This is a mixture of top-down, bottom-up. Everyone needs their say in this, in delivering efficient construction projects. And we are seeing that, especially in the UK and the tier 1 type contractors. We're seeing that involvement from getting all the subcontractors on board. And we've got one client that calls, which they told us the other day, one client that calls their subcontractors their partners, because they want to partner with them in these construction projects. They're not just someone that comes in, does the jobs and leaves. Their input is just as important as the main contractors. So again, I keep going back to this, but it's important to encourage that mentality to be transparent, to collaborate, integrate, whatever you want to call it, because only then will you deliver an efficient project. Avoid as much as possible. So information empowers proactive planning decisions. So everyone on this webinar will digest information differently. Some might like a spreadsheet, some would want a Gantt chart, some might even want a Word document, or however you want to do it. But then we've got BIM-based visualization. It's a really powerful tool to understand progress, or what something should look like if you're looking at a direct model of it. And if you can use colors to break things up into statuses and stuff like VisiLean does, it's so visual and easy to understand that it can only benefit people. Then we've got some of the newer technologies that are coming into construction, like virtual and augmented reality, and they're amazing if you can utilize them, but not everyone has that kind of funding or that kind of budget. And even if you do have that kind of budget, you need to have the right mentality to be able to execute, or the right process to bring in something new like that and to maximize the benefits. And something so simple as location-based information. So trying to break activities down into as much detail as possible, adding locations to them, things like that, can help reduce the amount of rework and changes on a project. So if we're having a pool planning meeting, and we're doing it by location, for example. So let's just say building 1, floor 1. So floor 1, there's 20 trades working there. Is that really efficient? Do we want to actually think about that in advance and say, actually, we don't need 20 trades working on top of each other at the same time. Let's be a bit more efficient here. Because what you don't want to happen is to get to the site, 20 people are working, some people can't work because someone's got a flamethrower out or something like that. Those kind of things cause issues. So the more we can try and get everyone's involvement, so I know, okay, 20 trades scheduled to be there that day, but let me speak to this subcontractor, decide whether he actually needs to be there, or what kind of, does he need the area closed to be able to do that kind of work? Those are the kind of things you can try and capture early on to reduce the amount of rework that actually happens on site. We've got a couple of questions, but I will come back to those at the questions section at the end. So realistic schedules. So we've done webinars on this in the past, and it's super important to mitigate changes by having realistic schedules, okay? So it's important to review, map out your constraints, commit to work, and then act, okay? And we mentioned this previously, act at the last responsible moment. So I don't want to commit to work months in advance. I want to do it at the last responsible minute when I know I can actually execute that. But again, you don't want to leave it too late, because then it's irresponsible. Issues can occur, changes and things and delays. So you want to commit to work and act at the last possible minute to make it as efficient as possible. Again, I touched upon it earlier, team-based planning. Getting the teams involved and understanding what it takes for them to execute their works will give you much more realistic schedules, okay? The more realistic you can make your schedules, the less change and disruption you're going to have on a project, okay? And that is essential. What I don't want is someone at head office come out with a program and then those 20 packages I spoke earlier have to just go off and do that work. They all should have input and let everyone know what they need to get their works done, what space they need, what materials they need, everything like that. And only then can you have a realistic schedule. And it goes without saying, but apply your past experiences. So learn from what happened previously on this job, on the last job, what issues you faced, how you faced them, and apply those to make these schedules realistic. What we find is we see people create schedules and they don't really even acknowledge what's happened in the past on past projects and things like that, because the client's driving a program that they need to be done in a specific amount of time or things like that. And it doesn't allow for realistic scheduling. So have clarity. So we mentioned how not having clarity can cause huge issues earlier, but you need to know what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And it needs to be clear. Clear communication is so important in construction, especially when you've got so many different stakeholders, like I mentioned. You've got so many moving things. You've got the changes that we know are going to happen. It's really important to have clear communication. When you have clear communication, when these changes happen, like we said, there is going to be change. It just always happens. You can act efficiently and they don't become huge delays or problems. Make the job site ready. Now, this sounds like something really, really obvious, but it's actually something that we don't see enough of in construction. We've got a tool on VisiLean, a make ready date. So basically, you can set a date whenever you want in advance of an activity starting, and someone has to go and make sure that that's ready. So usually it's the week before. So the week before an activity starts, VisiLean will send someone a notification saying you need to make this activity ready. So have you got the right tools, the right material, the right labor and things like that? Only once you've said yes, 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 can you actually start that activity. But it's just something that's not done enough. We see so often that people just turn up to site and expect to do their work without actually having thought in advance of what they need or things like that. And that causes change, that causes delays. Check for the design specs and information. So make sure you have the latest revision with all specs and information. Now, hopefully, I've just previously drummed in that you need to communicate with other teams. So hopefully you won't need to check, because you've been collaborating so often, it's drilled into you exactly what the latest revision is and what the latest spec is. But should you not do that, just go check, because I've seen so many times work is about to be executed and they haven't got the latest revision, and it just leads to rework and issues. Focus on production. So it's really important, and I think we get held up in construction on when we need to build something, but not actually how we're going to build it as much. So try and plan in greater detail. So as you get closer to the job, plan with precision and factor in potential issues. And I've mentioned previously, map those constraints. Anything you think could possibly be a constraint, just get it down on VisiLean, get it down in a room on a whiteboard, and get other people's involvement. And some of them might just be resolved instantly, and some of them might need some more thought. But the more you can plan in that kind of granular detail, the less likely you're going to come up with big issues. And then learn from your breakdowns. So, okay, change happened. We didn't necessarily deal with that as best we could or as efficiently as we could, but make sure we learn that, what happened, and how we can improve going forward. So again, I don't want to keep jumping in, but on VisiLean, we've got a dashboard, and you can map out all the constraints that have ever happened on a project. So you can go back and analyze, okay, that one we dealt well with, that's how we did it. This one we didn't deal so well with, but why? What will we not do next time? And it's important to focus on maintaining the flow. So even with revisions, ensure the flow of information is intact across the supply chain. Okay, so changes happen. We've said that, we've all agreed. But keep that information between those teams, that communication happening. So that way we can deal with those changes efficiently. There's nothing worse than when, okay, a problem's arisen and then communication breaks down. I don't have the information I need. Like, that can't happen on these construction projects. Even on a small to huge project, those kind of issues are massive. I mean, for a smaller company, it might mean going out of business. For a big company, it could be millions of pounds or dollars, whatever, of loss revenue. So can you let the changes constantly affect your projects? And the answer is simply no. And how are we going to stop those changes really happening? And I'm going to give the example as VisiLean, because I work for VisiLean and it's a good plug opportunity. But we've got some lean features that can really help you mitigate those changes. And if they are going to happen, it gives you the information to react flexibly. So we've got complete flexibility in our planning. So if changes occur, you can really easily reschedule, see the latest revisions, see the impact. Everyone works off the same platform, so everyone's aware of these changes. There's no misconception of progress or breakdown of communication, because everyone's working off our platform. We have that dedicated make ready process, which I spoke about earlier. So just something as simple as sending a push notification to someone to go and check that they can start that activity next week. Have they got the right materials, things like that? And you'd be surprised at how many times this has actually helped people that, oh, actually the space won't be clear by then. That's going to be an issue. And then hopefully you've got a week's grace to try and sort that problem out before that activity is actually delayed. We provide you with a last planner, a digital last planner solution as one part of our software, where you can take commitments. So that section there, kind of vision, which we call our scheduler, enables those last planner sessions where people can collaborate, where people can make commitments to doing activities, and you get that realistic schedule that I spoke about earlier, instead of a load of unrealistic commitments that we made to a client just to win the job. Let's get everyone involved. Let's get granular detail, and let's commit to that detail, and we'll get much more realistic programs done, which lead to less changes down the line. On VisiLean, our handovers are seamless. So as soon as, let's just use, someone's building a wall, they've built their wall, next person in line, maybe the painter and decorator, for example, the plasterer or whatever, they can, they'll get a notification that they can start their work. Those handover periods, that lack of information that normally happens, can cause huge delays, and we see it on every project we go to see. So on VisiLean, we've made those handovers seamless. All the information, as soon as someone finishes, the information is all available even beforehand to the next person in line, so they know exactly what they need to do, when they need to do it, and how they're going to do it. And that eliminates so much rework and kind of waste in terms of, when I say waste, I don't just mean materials, but things like labor. Okay, so I've got to start my project, but my activity, but the person in line hasn't finished theirs. So I've just got a team waiting around, a team that could be working and things like that. So we've eliminated that issue. So can your team even visualize what you're asking them to do? So like I said earlier, BIM is hugely growing, and I know someone asked about BIM, and we'll come on to that a bit later in the questions. But if you have all these designs and things like that, let's use them, let's utilize them, let's get them to the people who are actually doing the work, so they know exactly what they need to do and how they need to do it and what it should look like. It helps so much. And that was just, sorry if I go back, that was just an example of how VisiLean, you can visualize through our platform, where we've imported a model. That model is linked to a construction program. Each activity has a status, and the status is represented by color. So I know straight away that middle row of columns, which is red, has stopped. There's an issue there. So I know exactly, I can visualize the problem, and I can go there, I can deal with it, I can speak to them, I can do it via VisiLean. There's so many different more options available to me, but now I can visualize it, whereas before I was going in blind almost. VisiLean has a lean workflow, and this is a graphic just to show how it's done. You set up your project, you create a top level plan or import plan into VisiLean, break that down into milestones. You can break that into weekly work plans. There's continuous production. Everyone is updating the system. It's not just reliant on planners. Everyone's out doing their own thing, using mobile apps to update. And we provide you with all the data for your reporting and things like that. And again, the data is available to be able to complete and review the project. Again, we've got seamless communication with VisiLean. So whether you're on site, whether you're in the design team, the construction team, everyone is on one platform. So if the design is delayed, they press stop on their activity, for example, or it will just slip into a natural delay, and it will alert everyone that's delayed. So that straight away, the construction team knows, okay, the revision's delayed. There's no point starting this work. Let's not waste time, effort, money, things like that. And that communication is much more transparent, and information can flow much easier. And that is it for today. So I saw a few questions, so thank you all for joining us today. It was a really good turnout. If anyone's got any questions, you're invited to type them in the chat box, and either myself, or if it's really hard, one of the other VisiLean team will answer. What percentage so we got a message from Darren Sparks. What percentage uptake do you have from the design team compared to contractors? Very good question. So VisiLean initially was a tool for construction. And then we had more and more kind of clients request that they involved the design team and things like that. So we've added more and more features for design, and we're continuously adding them based on client requirements and based on industry trends and things like that. So I would say, and one of the VisiLean team can quote me if I'm wrong, I'd say about 70% contractors, 30% design, maybe in terms of clients. But now the design side is growing much more and really rapidly as well. But I always say, there's so much power in having a project all on one platform, where all the data and information is kept in one place, and we know exactly what happened from design through to construction. Whereas that information normally is not passed. The design house doesn't necessarily let the construction team have that information. And I think it's such a shame, because like I said, there's so many good sources of information. And if we just collaborated, it will help us on the next project or midway through this project, and you can continuously improve. Construction is, like I said, the margins are so tight that everyone needs to be in this together, and we can't just have design making massive profits or construction making massive profits everyone is part of the wheel, and everyone needs to give their input and do that. But yeah, so to answer that question, it's massively growing, but we did start as a construction tool, so we're predominantly construction. Hopefully that answers your question. Oh, what about the design teams manages the project in point view as per customer? I'm not 100% what you mean there. We might have to come back to that. If you could just elaborate a bit more on your question, VJ, and I'll come back to that. Do you see VisiLean working alongside, say, P6 or replacing it? P6 is an amazing tool for complex projects, things like that. We would just import your P6 into VisiLean and convert it into our platform. The uniqueness of VisiLean is you could have your main program imported from P6, or you can create it from scratch in VisiLean. It's up to you. We've got similar functionality, but you can also import programs from other subbies, packages, and things like that, and they might be using different softwares. So you might have a line item brought in from your P6 that might be mechanical and electrical. We can import their Excel sheet, their P6, their Asta, their MS projects, and convert it into VisiLean under your program. So that way, everyone is now collaborating without actually even picking up a phone. If we're all off the same platform, then our communication is just better straight away. And we're not working in silos anymore. There's so many different sources of information in construction projects. We need one place where everyone has access that they can get this information. So Darren, yeah, I mean, look, one day we'd love to be a tool as powerful as P6, but in the meantime, we'd like to complement it as best as possible. P6 is a fantastic, especially for like complex 20, 30,000 task projects. P6 is amazing. Thank you. This was really useful. Thank you so much. Can you please advise if this will also be available as a recording? So yes, this will be available. Hopefully in the next few days, we'll upload this to our YouTube channel and our website. As I said, the last webinar, we had a bit of a technical issue, so it only went online today. But that was a really good one, top down versus bottom up planning. So yeah, it'll be on our website. No problem. Yeah, so basically you can import via IFC, and I think now we do integrate with a couple of other native kind of design tools. So pretty much, it's very rare that we've had something that can't come into VisiLean. And then from there, we can link individual elements or a package of elements, if you will, to the program. So that way, if that activity is red for stopped, that'll be reflected in the model. So again, it's just that extra level of visibility and visualization for people to understand. Can we be issued a certificate? Oh, sorry. And what about Revit architecture software also used in it or not? I'm not sure what you mean there, but we can import models from pretty much anything. So IFC format, I think we do Navisworks now. If someone from VisiLean can let me know if I'm wrong or not. And Synchro, pretty much anything, and Revit as well. So yeah, VJ. Can we be issued a certificate of participation, sir? I would love to. Yeah, we can send you a certificate for participating in this webinar, no problem. If you just drop your email to make sure someone's got your email, that's no problem. Thank you, Darren. Thank you for your questions as well. It's really helpful. Thanks, VJ. If anyone has any more questions, I'll keep it open. But if not, thank you all for joining. I really appreciate everyone's time and things like that. I appreciate it's a crazy world at the moment still, and everyone's got things to do. But thank you for joining, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Yes, Darren, we should have your email address, but if not, just type it in the chat and I'll get my colleague James, who's our head of sales, to give you a call. Thank you, Daniel. We'll get you that certificate. Thanks, VJ. If you need anything, just let us know, but we'll contact you as well. Which software is most used in the construction industry? I'd say Excel, probably, most commonly used. I mean, you'd see the smallest project, maybe just even a refurb of a house or something like that, to huge infrastructure projects that utilize Excel. The problem with Excel, though, is, and it's very manual kind of data entry. So on big construction projects, you see people updating spreadsheets and things like that continuously, and it's very time consuming. So you want a tool, and I'm not just saying it because we work for VisiLean, but something that collaborates with everyone, so everyone can be updating rather than updating automatically, rather than having to manually spend time filling out spreadsheets or making tables or views. So everything on VisiLean is automatic, so you never have to generate a table or anything like that. All of that dashboard information you'd ever need to execute a construction project is automatic. I mean, I love Excel, but I think it needs to move with the times, and especially in construction, Excel sheets don't speak to P6, they don't speak to Revit models, so there's a real breakdown in communication there. And my pet hate with Excel is, by the time you've filled one out and saved it and sent it to people, it's probably out of date. Whereas something like VisiLean is a live working software. So as people are updating, VisiLean's updating in front of you. So whenever you log in, it's going to be the most up to date. Namaste from India. Namaste to you too. Thank you for joining us. The next webinar, I think it's in 3 weeks, but we will send out, keep an eye on the social media channels and stuff like that, but it should be 3 weeks, pending some sort of catastrophe. Oh, thanks, VJ. We do student subscriptions and things like that and training. So if you need anything, just let us know what you need and we'll try and see if we can help you. Okay, I need to wrap it up there, but thank you again, everyone. And if you've got any questions, please get in touch with us. All our information is available on the website and things like that. So just drop us a line, or you can catch me on LinkedIn and things like that. But thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a good rest of the week.